Winter's cold was strong, but the sudden burning pain on her skin was much stronger. One small frozen hand reached up from the blood-red snow and held her wrist tightly. As the baby cried, an old royal mark burned itself into her skin. This mark tied a lonely Omega girl to the most feared Alpha King in the land. Cold winds screamed through the thick, dark trees of the Caledonian forest. The wind carried the smell of danger and death. It was the middle of December in the year 1243. The northern lands were covered by a long, cruel winter. Rowena Fairchild walked slowly through the deep snow. Her thin, torn wool cloak did almost nothing to stop the freezing air. As an Omega of the Silver Pine Pack, she already knew how hard life could be. While the Alphas and Betas ate warm food inside the Great Hall of Oakhaven, Rowena and the other low-rank wolves had to search for wet firewood just so their cold little homes would not freeze solid. Frost stuck to her dark eyelashes. Her fingers were numb and purple from breaking dead branches off the frozen trees. Her pack was ruled by the cruel Alpha Bram. He treated Omegas like unpaid workers. Long ago, Rowena had learned to keep her head down, to cover her scent with ash and pine needles, and to stay almost invisible. But on this dangerous night, the forest held secrets that would change her quiet life of hard work forever. A sharp, high sound cut through the loud wind. Rowena stopped. Her boots sank deeper into the soft snow. She listened carefully, wondering if it was a dying rabbit or a winter ghost. Then the sound came again, a high, scared cry that clearly belonged to a baby, a little werewolf pup. She threw her firewood away and climbed over a snowbank. Her motherly feelings were stronger than her fear of the dark. She followed the fading cries toward a deep ditch near the frozen River Trent. What she found there made her blood feel colder than the ice around her. A black carriage lay broken and tipped over at the bottom of the rocky slope. The strong smell of blood filled the air. Bodies of strong guards in heavy armor lay scattered on the red snow. They wore the silver direwolf crest of the House of Lancaster. They had been killed by large, wild rogue wolves. Their throats were torn open. Near the broken carriage, leaning against the roots of an old elm tree, was a woman dressed in rich, soft velvet clothes. Her eyes were open but empty. Her stiff arms held a small bundle wrapped in royal blue silk. The crying came from that bundle. Rowena dropped to her knees beside the dead woman. Her breath caught in her throat. She gently pulled the heavy silk away and saw a red-faced, shaking baby boy. He looked only a few months old. His pale blue eyes were bright and full of strong power. He was freezing. His lips were turning a dangerous blue color. "Hush, little one," Rowena whispered. Her voice shook as she reached out to lift him from the dead woman's frozen arms. "I have you. I have you." The moment her bare fingers touched the baby's skin, something strange happened. The baby stopped crying at once. He looked up at her. With a sudden strength no newborn should have, his tiny hand shot out and locked tightly around her left wrist. A sharp electric feeling raced up Rowena's arm. She gasped and tried to pull away, but the baby's grip was as strong as iron. Then the fire came. Terrible, blinding pain exploded on the inside of her wrist. It was so strong that she let out a choked scream. It felt as if a blacksmith had pressed a white-hot iron brand straight onto her skin. Rowena fell into the snow, biting her teeth hard as the smell of burned skin filled her nose. The snow around her arm hissed and melted while an old, powerful magic took hold of her soul. When the burning heat finally left, she pulled her arm to her chest. She breathed hard and fast. She stared at her wrist in pure horror. Permanently burned into her pale skin in dark black ink was a mark. It was the crest of a snarling direwolf, mixed with a crown of thorns. Rowena felt the world spin. Every wolf in the Northern Territories knew that symbol. It was the royal seal of King Alistair Lancaster, the highest alpha of the Obsidian crown. But this was no ordinary tattoo. It was a soul bond mark. According to the old werewolf stories, such a mark only appeared when the moon goddess saw a deep, true link between a king and his fated mate. Why had it appeared now? Why through the touch of this orphaned child? Fear flooded her. If Alpha Bram found an Omega with the king's royal mark, he would surely skin her alive, thinking it was a fake and a crime. Worse, if the king's enemies who had killed this group came back, they would cull both her and the child without a second thought. Rowena acted on pure desperate feeling. She took the heavy fur cloak from the dead woman and wrapped the baby tightly inside it, so the royal blue silk could not be seen. Then she tore a strip of cloth from her own underskirt and bound her burning wrist, hiding the royal crest. Holding the warm bundle against her chest, she left her firewood behind and ran back toward the village of Oakhaven. The heavy snow was already covering her tracks and burying the terrible scene under white. 3 long, painful days passed inside Rowena's cold stone cottage. She named the baby Callum, whispering the name in the dark, while she fed him warm goat's milk soaked into pieces of cloth. The child was amazingly strong. His icy pale color soon turned into a healthy pink glow. But the quiet of their hiding place was only a pretend peace. News had spread like fire through the taverns and markets of Oakhaven. The whole kingdom was in a state of terrible uproar. Traders from the southern lands, said to be paid by the tricky Duchess Camilla, had attacked the royal group. King Alistair's carriage had been tricked away, and his baby son, the only heir to the Obsidian crown, had been taken in the chaos. The king, a hard and famous warrior, who had already lost his queen to sickness the year before, was tearing the northern lands apart in his grief and anger. Rowena knew she was hiding the most wanted child in the kingdom. Every time she looked at Callum, her bound wrist throbbed with a steady beat, a constant reminder of the magical and dangerous link that now tied her to a king she had never met. She wanted to give the boy back, to walk up to the guards and hand him over. But she knew the truth of her world. An Omega showing up with the royal heir would not be called a hero. She would be blamed for the kidnapping, hurt for answers, and killed. Her fears came true on the morning of the 4th day. A loud blast from a bronze war horn shook the snow from the roofs of Oakhaven. Rowena jumped up from her bed, holding Callum tightly. The heavy, steady thunder of armored war horses filled the stone streets. The scent that washed over the village was crushing, a pure, heavy alpha power mixed with the sharp smell of blood and storm air. It forced every wolf in the village to their knees. King Alistair had arrived. "Out! Every man, woman, and pup, into the square!" shouted the loud voice of Alpha Bram, eager to bow before his king. "Do not keep the king waiting." Rowena's heart pounded hard against her ribs. She looked down at Callum, who was thankfully asleep. She wrapped him in a bundle of rough brown wool, so he looked like a bag of root vegetables, and put him on her back. She checked the dirty bandages around her wrist to make sure the black crest was completely hidden, then stepped out into the freezing morning air. The village square was filled with scared faces. Hundreds of wolves from the Silverpine pack stood shivering in the snow, their heads bowed low. In the center of the square sat King Alistair on a huge coal-black warhorse. He was a terrifying sight, broad shoulders wrapped in dark furs and silver armor. His face was a mask of cold anger. His strong jaw was tight, and his bright amber eyes swept over the crowd like a hawk looking for prey. Beside him stood his royal guards, with swords already drawn. Alpha Bram was bowing so low his nose almost touched the frost. "My king," Bram stammered. His usual pride was completely gone. "We are honored. We have searched our lands, but there is no sign of the traders or the royal heir." "You have searched nothing, Bram," King Alistair said. His voice was like grinding stone and rumbled deep in everyone's chest. "My trackers followed the scent of the attack to the edge of the Caledonian woods. My son was brought near this very village." Rowena tried to hide at the back of the crowd, behind the wide shoulders of a blacksmith named Garrett. Her wrist began to burn with a heat she had not felt since the forest. The mark was reacting to the king's nearness. It was a sharp local heat that made her clench her teeth to stop a whimper. King Alistair got down from his horse. His heavy boots crunched on the ice. He began to walk slowly through the rows of kneeling villagers, breathing deeply. He was searching for the scent of his own bloodline. As the king came closer to the back of the crowd, Callum suddenly moved. Whether it was the cold, the heavy alpha power, or the blood link to the man coming near, the baby let out a soft, restless whimper. Rowena bounced the bundle gently and prayed to the goddess for silence, but the sound had already been heard. King Alistair stopped completely. His amber eyes locked straight on the place where Rowena was hiding. The crowd parted at once, pushing aside to clear a path for the king and avoid his anger. Suddenly, Rowena stood all alone, the hidden bundle on her back and her left arm held against her chest. "You," the king ordered, his gaze cutting through her thin defenses. "Step forward, Omega." Alpha Bram rushed forward and sneered at Rowena. "Forgive her, my king. She is a worthless scavenger, an Omega of no importance. She probably stole food from your guards." "Silence," Alistair roared. The force of his voice sent Bram tumbling backward into the snow. The king stepped right into Rowena's space. Up close, he was overwhelming. The smell of cedar, winter storms, and raw power wrapped around her. He did not reach for the bundle on her back. Instead, his eyes dropped to her left arm, where the dirty linen bandages were suddenly glowing with a soft golden light from under the cloth. The magic of the royal seal was answering its master. Without a word, King Alistair reached out and took her wrist. His touch was not cruel, but it was firm and unyielding. With one quick pull, he tore the dirty rags away. The crowd gasped in shock altogether. There, glowing softly against her pale skin, was the clear, perfect mark of the Obsidian crown. Alpha Bram's face turned white. His jaw dropped in horror as he realized he had been treating the king's fated mate like dirt. King Alistair's angry face broke into pure stunned surprise. He looked from the glowing royal mark to Rowena's terrified eyes, and then slowly he reached out and pulled back the brown wool on her back. He revealed the wide blue eyes of his lost son. Silence fell over the village of Oakhaven. It was a heavy quiet, so deep that the only sound was the howling winter wind tearing through the pine trees. Hundreds of wolves held their breath. Their eyes jumped between the glowing royal crest on Rowena's wrist and the living, breathing heir to the Obsidian crown wrapped against her back. Alistair Lancaster stood frozen for a short moment. His amber eyes were wide, with a softness that few in the kingdom had ever seen. Slowly, his large, gloved hands reached out. Rowena shook and pulled back, expecting a hit. Omegas were taught that the touch of an alpha brought only pain. But the king did not strike her. Instead, he gently lifted the rough woolen bundle from her shoulders. As he pulled the cloth back to show his son's face, a heavy, shaking breath left the king's chest. "Callum," Alistair whispered. His deep voice cracked under the weight of great relief. He pressed his forehead against the baby's soft cheek. The child babbled happily, not bothered at all by the cold or the terrifying power of his father. Alpha Bram, realizing how huge his mistake was, fell to his knees and crawled forward in the snow. "My king, praise the moon goddess. The pup is alive. This Omega must have stolen him from the wreckage. She is a thief, a parasite. Hand her over to me, and I will have her killed for hiding the royal heir without telling the crown at once." Alistair's head snapped up. The soft relief in his eyes vanished, and was replaced at once by a murderous, crushing rage. The alpha power that exploded from him was so strong that several villagers cried out and pressed their faces into the frozen mud. Rowena gasped. Her knees almost gave way, but an invisible force, the sudden clear hum of the mate bond, kept her standing. "You dare?" Alistair growled. His voice was a low, deadly rumble that shook the stones. He handed the baby to his captain of the guard, a tall warrior named Callum, then stepped toward Bram. "You dare speak of killing the woman who bears the mark of the Obsidian crown. You dare call my fated queen a parasite?" "Queen?" Bram stuttered. His face lost all color. "My king, surely it is a trick of dark magic. She is an Omega, a low scavenger. The goddess would never pair the highest Alpha with a creature of such low standing." Before the last word could fully leave Bram's mouth, Alistair moved with blinding speed. He grabbed the false Alpha by the throat and lifted him completely off the ground. Bram's legs kicked wildly in the air as he choked and clawed at the king's iron grip. "The moon goddess makes no mistakes," Alistair roared. His amber eyes flashed with golden fire. "This woman kept my son alive when my own royal guards fell. She sheltered him, fed him, and protected him while you sat in your warm hall, not even knowing about the blood spilled on your borders. You are stripped of your title, Bram. You are no longer Alpha of the Silverpine Pack. If I ever see your face inside my lands again, I will tear your throat out myself." With a flick of his wrist, the king threw the disgraced former Alpha into a snowbank. Bram scrambled away like a beaten dog and vanished into the trees without looking back. Alistair turned his attention back to Rowena. She stood shaking in her thin cloak. Her dark hair was tangled, and her pale face was streaked with dirt and soot. She was terrified. The mark on her wrist pulsed with a warm, steady beat that tied her to the tall man in front of her. "What is your name?" the king asked. His tone softened a great deal, though his strong presence remained. "Rowena, your grace," she whispered, keeping her eyes on the snow. Alistair stepped closer and reached out to gently lift her chin with 2 fingers. A spark of electricity jumped where his skin met hers and sent a rush of warmth through her freezing body. "Look at me, Rowena." Reluctantly she met his eyes. "You saved my bloodline," he said firmly. His thumb brushed a smudge of ash from her cheek. "When my son grabbed you, the ancient magic of our ancestors saw your pure heart and strong spirit. It bound us together. You are no longer an Omega of Silverpine. You are the Queen of the Northern Territories, and you will ride with me to Castle Valerius." Panic flared in her chest. "My king, I am nothing but a servant. I do not know how to be a queen. The court will tear me apart." "Let them try," Alistair said. A dangerous small smile touched the corner of his mouth. "They will quickly learn that anyone who disrespects my mate will share Bram's fate. We leave at once." The journey to the capital was a blur of rich carriages and warm furs. Rowena found herself wrapped in soft velvets, sitting across from the most powerful man in the world. Callum rested peacefully in her arms, and would not settle for anyone else, not even the king. Alistair watched them with a deep, thoughtful gaze, and slowly explained the dangerous political world she was about to enter. "Duchess Camilla of the Southern Territories has been pushing for me to take her daughter as my new bride," Alistair explained as he poured 2 silver cups of spiced wine. "She is ruthless, rich, and commands a large army. I have no doubt she planned the attack on my carriage. Bringing an Omega back as my fated mate will make her furious. The capital is a nest of snakes, Rowena. You must stay close to me." Rowena held the sleeping baby tighter. The fear of her old life was fading, replaced by a fierce motherly need to protect the child in her arms. "I survived the freezing woods and the cruelty of Oakhaven, my king. I can survive your court." Alistair's eyes darkened with clear approval and growing affection. "I believe you can, my queen." Castle Valerius was a tall fortress of black stone and colored glass, standing high on the edge of a sharp cliff that looked over the restless sea. The moment Rowena stepped into the great hall, she felt the weight of 1,000 unfriendly stares. The courtiers, dressed in shining silks and heavy jewels, parted like the sea. Their faces showed thinly hidden disgust and shock. Word had traveled faster than their royal group. Everyone knew the king had returned with his heir, and an Omega who claimed to be his fated mate. Standing at the base of the Obsidian throne was Duchess Camilla. She was a striking, hard-looking woman with silver hair piled high on her head and eyes as cold as a snake's. She wore a gown of deep emerald green, and her smile was sharp enough to cut. "Your Grace," Camilla purred, dropping into a deep, mocking curtsy. "Praise the heavens the young prince is safe. We feared the worst when the rogue wolves attacked." Her gaze shifted to Rowena, and traveled up and down the former Omega's body with open dislike. "And you have brought a nursemaid. How practical." "She is no nursemaid, Camilla," Alistair announced. His voice carried easily through the huge hall. He took Rowena's hand and raised it high so the entire court could see the stark black direwolf crest burned into her pale skin. "She is Rowena Lancaster. She bears the mark of the Obsidian crown. She is my fated mate, and your new queen. Anyone who forgets this will answer to my blade." A collective gasp echoed off the high ceilings. Camilla's smile slipped. Her jaw clenched so tightly that the muscles jumped under her powdered skin. "Fated mate," she repeated softly. The words dripped with poison. How miraculous. A true fairy tale. Rowena felt the hatred coming from the Duchess. The Omega instincts that had kept her alive in the harsh wilderness screamed a clear warning. This woman was a hunter, and she was getting ready to strike. For the next 2 weeks, Rowena's life turned into a hard test of strength. While Alistair was busy questioning prisoners from the attack and trying to find solid proof of Camilla's treason, Rowena had to find her way through the dangerous waters of the royal court. Courtiers whispered behind fancy fans. Servants purposely ignored her requests, and accidents began to happen. A poisoned cup of wine was stopped by her sharp sense of smell. A loosened saddle strap almost threw her from a horse. The peak of Camilla's desperate plans came on the night of the winter solstice. Alistair was holding a required war meeting in the lower parts of the fortress. Rowena was alone in the royal nursery, gently rocking Callum to sleep beside a bright fire. Outside, a violent blizzard beat against the colored glass windows and hid the sounds of the castle. Without warning, the heavy oak doors of the nursery clicked shut. The iron lock slid into place with a sickening thud. The temperature in the room dropped as the fire was suddenly put out by a local gust of dark magic. From the shadows stepped 3 men dressed in midnight black leather. Their faces were hidden by masks. They held jagged daggers coated in an oily green poison. Behind them, stepping gracefully into the moonlight that came through the frost-covered glass, was Duchess Camilla. "It is a pity," Camilla whispered, her eyes locked on the baby in Rowena's arms. "I would have preferred to just kill you, little Omega, but the boy must die too, so my bloodline can take the throne." Rowena did not scream. The scared, quiet Omega she had once been was gone, left behind in the snows of Oakhaven. In her place stood a fiercely protective mother, powered by the ancient magic of the royal mate bond. "If you take one more step, Duchess," Rowena growled. Her eyes flashed with an unnatural golden light that matched the king's. "I will rip you apart." Camilla laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Kill them." The assassins lunged. Driven by pure instinct, Rowena spun and placed Callum safely into his strong iron crib. As the first assassin slashed at her throat, she ducked under the blade. The royal mark on her wrist flared with blinding, searing heat. A surge of huge, alpha-level strength flooded her veins. She drove her palm upward and struck the assassin under his chin with a sickening crunch. He fell at once. The second attacker hesitated, giving Rowena the opening she needed. She grabbed a heavy brass candlestick from the mantel and swung it like a warhammer, breaking the man's arm and sending his poisoned dagger clattering across the stone floor. Camilla's proud smirk vanished. "Useless fools!" she shrieked. She drew a hidden thin knife from her sleeve and charged toward the crib. "No!" Rowena roared. She threw herself between the Duchess and the child, taking the sharp bite of the knife deep into her left shoulder. Pain exploded through her body, but she did not fall. She reached out and gripped Camilla's throat with her uninjured arm. Her nails grew into deadly sharp claws. Before Rowena could deliver the final blow, the heavy oak doors were blown off their iron hinges and splintered into 1,000 pieces. King Alistair stood in the doorway, a terrifying picture of pure rage. His armor was gone, his chest heaving, and his eyes completely black, with his wolf rising to the surface. Captain Callum and a dozen royal guards rushed into the room and quickly subdued the remaining assassin. Alistair crossed the room in a blur. He did not look at Camilla. He only had eyes for Rowena, who was bleeding heavily onto the fine rugs. "Take the Duchess to the dungeons," Alistair commanded. His voice held no mercy at all. "Her execution will be at dawn. Burn her lands and scatter her family." The guards dragged the screaming, cursing Duchess from the room. Alistair fell to his knees beside Rowena and pulled her gently into his arms. The wound in her shoulder was deep, but the poison had not reached her heart. "You are safe," he whispered fiercely, pressing his lips to her forehead. "I have you." Rowena looked past him to the crib, where little Callum was wide awake, watching them with his bright blue eyes. She smiled and rested her head against her king's broad chest. She had been cast out, frozen, and hunted, but the Omega had found her home. She was a survivor, a mother, and without any doubt, the true queen of the Obsidian crown. Stories like this one, even though they are full of magic and werewolves, can still teach us real lessons that matter in everyday life. In the year 1243, real people in the cold northern lands of Scotland and England faced long, dangerous winters just like Rowena did. Many children lost their parents to sickness, war, or accidents, and the kind people who chose to help those children, even when it was risky, often changed history in quiet ways. Choosing to protect someone weaker than you, standing up when it would be easier to stay silent, and treating every person with dignity, no matter their rank, are values that still make the world better today. Real courage is not only for kings and queens. It lives in ordinary people who decide to do the right thing when no one is watching.